Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy Dani Mantilla y estamos aquí en Kinótico con la última entrevista que vamos a hacer en esta 69 edición de la Seminci, un festival en el que hemos hablado con talento nacional e internacional y lo vamos a clausurar con talento internacional como es Greg Kwedar. Welcome to Valladolid and
Thank you.
Kinótico.
It's great to be here.
Es el director, guionista, productor de una película Sing Sing que se va a estrenar en cines españoles el 10 de enero, que va a estar bueno, ya está en la conversación por la temporada de premios y que tiene muchas cosas muy comentables. Greg, how has been traveling around the world with this film? Because it had the world premiere last year in TIFF, and now we are in October, like 14 months later.
Yeah, I'm like an old war veteran now, but I was just talking about this earlier. It's one of those things where it's the most exhausting thing I've ever done. I've been traveling since March almost every week with the film. And yet at the same time, because of this story and the group of people that I usually get to travel with, the cast of this film, every time I'm on a stage with these men, it sort of fills me back up, and so it keeps that equilibrium. I'm so tired,
Mhm.
but also so full of life right now and so passionate about this movie.
Because the premiere was September 2023. Did you prepare like mentally, physically for the award season? Because it's really long, as you were saying, and you had like 6 months to prepare. Did you?
Well, it was actually, we were kind of nervous because when we premiered at Toronto last year, it was such an extraordinary experience in that room. The screening was kind of one of the most intense, joyous, like profound theatrical experiences I've ever had. And then we got acquired during the festival, and then
By A24.
everything went, yeah, by
Mhm.
A24, and everything went dark because it was going to become a 2024 release and relaunch in March. So the whole time we were just like, was that just lightning in a bottle? Like, will we be able to recapture that same energy, or is there going to be too much dust on our movie sitting up on a shelf? But then when we relaunched at South by Southwest, it was like even more intense and even more emotional. And we are like, okay, something's really happening here.
Mhm.
And so, I think, no, I was not prepared for what I was about to embark on. And it still, feels like it's just beginning at the same time. But being in these conversations, being a part of this unfolding story is very surreal, but it's also a great privilege.
Mhm. Last year, Colman Domingo had Rustin, so A24 decided to wait and release the film this year. Sometimes when the films open in a festival, filmmakers have time to make small adjustments and changes. Did you do the same with Sing Sing, or is it the same film that opened like 14 months ago?
When we delivered the film to our partners, distribution partners, we did the tiniest tweaks to like the audio mix,
Hmm.
like a few little edits to music, but the picture remained unchanged. So the movie is the movie. It's just kind of got a little bit of a freshening up as we were preparing to sort of release it to the
Hmm.
world.
Let's go to the start, because what was the thing that made you fall in love with these real people that end up on the screen, and this experience, the theater that can heal lives in a way?
Well, yeah, not only did we premiere 14 months ago, but in total, I've been working on this movie for over 8.5
Wow.
years. And it really is the people that have sustained me this long. But I mean, at the very beginning, like rewinding the clock all the way back, I came across the story quite unexpectedly.
Hmm.
I was producing a short documentary inside of a maximum security prison in Kansas in the United States. And on a tour of the facility, I came across a very unique program. It was just by passing by a cell, I saw a young man raising a rescue dog inside of his cell, and I just saw the healing that was happening in that room. And I was desperate to know, was there anyone else out there doing things differently, like what I had just witnessed? Because it upended all of my expectations about prison and incarcerated people, which were largely built on the movies I grew up watching. And so in the hotel room that night, I typed that question into Google, who is doing things differently in prison? And I learned about this program in New
Hmm.
York, Rehabilitation Through the Arts. They'd been around since 1996. They'd done all these classic plays, But there was this Esquire article that I read that night of an original production of a time traveling musical comedy called Breaking the Mummy's Code. And I was like, what is that? You know, it was the playfulness of this work juxtaposed against its harsh environment that felt almost like in the joy of the process, it felt like this act of rebellion, and I was just so drawn to that. And very soon after, met these real people through Brent Buell, the theater teacher. He invited us to New York to meet some of his friends who had come home from
Mhm.
prison, and a lot of the men that are in the movie now were there at that breakfast 8.5 years ago.
And when did you realize that you could do the film with them on screen?
I mean, right when I met them, you're aware of the depth of talent, and just the presence.
The gravitas some of them
Of
have, yeah.
course, I met the real Clarence Maclin at that breakfast 8.5 years ago, and I was like, that is a movie star. It was just clear. It's that thing that you can't explain, you just know it when you see it. It's just that magic. And so I knew that we wanted the alumni of this program to feature in the film, and that confidence only grew with time. And so it started as like a feature of a movie that over this period of developing the film, by the time we shot it, it was actually the absolute foundation of the movie, and almost this epicenter, this kind of heartbeat of the movie would be the alumni.
Hmm. And you decided to have Colman Domingo in the heart of the movie. Why a professional actor? Did you need like a guide for them on set, or what was the reasoning behind it?
Well, I think, the character that Coleman plays, Divine G, is sort of the point of view of the movie. It's the eyes that we see the world through. It's his face that is kind of a vessel for our experience into this world. And so I think it takes an actor, which I think Coleman is one of the finest actors working today, someone of his skill, his passion, and his sort of pathos to be our guide and sort of carry us through this experience.
Hmm. And what about the point of view? Because the film is set mostly on the the theater program. We barely see anything from their day-to-day lives. Why was that decision made?
Well, I think, the traditional prison experience is something we're all quite familiar with, and almost, you know, we don't need much of an imagination to sort of contemplate the horrors of incarceration. This program, though, is the thing that we haven't seen, and I think that's what warranted, at least what drew my attention, and what I hoped would draw other people in as they watched it too.
Hmm. There are a lot of discussions right now about who gets to tell stories. There is one great song in Hamilton, "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story."
Yeah.
For example, with Emilia Perez, there has been some discussion about why Jack Odiard tells a story set in Mexico. Did you have doubts about directing the film yourself because you're a white filmmaker? It's not a black story, but the main characters are black. And I remember, for example, the controversy with The Color Purple 40 years ago. Did you have that conversation?
Well, of course. And I think, really my perspective is that, where my confidence came from to be involved with the story, really on any level, was just looking to the program itself. Prison is one of the most segregated places in the world.
Hmm.
And yet, inside of one of the most segregated places in the world, inside of this program, it was this rare place that you could sort of put aside things that made us different from each other and actually do something together. And so, really, in the spirit of how the program operates, is where, and in the way that I was embraced by my collaborators, I really felt comfortable coming into this process and being a leader within it. But I think wrapped up into that
Hmm.
question is also this perspective that I don't really subscribe to, which is the auteur theory of filmmaking, that one filmmaker made all of this, happen. And it couldn't be more true, different from how we actually made our movie, which is this true community effort, really at every level of the process. This was done in concert with not just myself, but with Colman Domingo as a producer and storyteller with me, with the real Divine I and Divine G, who wrote the script with Clint and I, down to like how we actually even structure the whole movie, and the fact that we all worked together in this film for the exact same rate, and we all own the movie together. So the people that are centered in this movie have literal ownership over their own story.
Cool. We see how the program changes them. How has Sing Sing changed you as an artist and a person?
Wow. Um, you're just really tossing softballs. You know, I just got off a plane from New York. You're like, I'm ready for him. No, in ways that I have words for, in ways that maybe I'll never have words for, you know. And I think for one, it's just set a whole new standard of not just the kinds of movies I want to be a part of telling, but how I want to feel in my soul and my body when I'm telling them. You know, and the kind of people I want to be. If I could continue to be in collaboration with the quality and integrity of the artists that we made this movie with, um, I'll have a good life as an artist, I think.
Many filmmakers say that films are done three times: when you're writing them, when you're filming them, and when you are editing them. I wanted to ask you about the tone that you set on the editing, because it could be, I think it's an emotional film, but it's not like exploitative or like, and I think you know what I mean. How was finding the right tone for this, for the emotional side of this picture?
Something that we were contemplating through the entire journey of this experience, but I think tone was really, we were walking a tightrope, which is if you fell on this side, it would be fall into the same stereotypes that we were running from. It'd be overly gratuitous. Um, and if you fell on this side of the tightrope, it could be cheesy or like overly sentimental or saccharine. And so we were always kind of like navigating that. And we were also always navigating like what I would call like happy, sad, you know, like the balance of that emotional experience, which sometimes can be in the same scene. There's sometimes there could be something that could like make us all burst out laughing, and then we're like sort of wiping tears from our eyes, you know, and juggling that was not as difficult as you would imagine. I think because within this, you know, kind of troupe of actors, you know, you had this amazing exchange that was happening of actors like Colman and Paul Racy and Sean San Jose who were coming in with all of our real life alumni. We had 13 alumni in this movie that were constantly both very present in exploring what was happening with the work we were doing, but also brought so much history and experience, and that they were kind of helping calibrate the feeling and the tone alongside, because we had 13 experts of this story sort of there to help lead us.
You have shared the film with so many audiences in the world, but how was the experience of showing them the movie for the first time together?
Yeah, we actually had our New York premiere of Sing Sing inside Sing Sing.
Oh, cool.
And uh, you know, it was one of those things where you're looking out on this audience and you realize like this is the most important audience in the world for this movie. And I really just, I think the thing that you hope the most is that it just feels honest to the people who are actually living it right now. It was also very meta because it was like that audience was made up mostly of members of this program who are currently in the middle of it inside the theater that this play, Break the Money Square, was actually performed, with a screen now playing the movie starring people who performed in the play, you know, back in 2005, who are also in the audience now as free men coming back in to sort of present this movie to men incarcerated. So you can imagine all of the layers of that. But there were things that play the exact same that they played all over the world. You know, like the same moment everyone laughs and the same moment everyone cries. But then there were things that only I had ever experienced with that audience, which particularly at the end of the movie, you know, when Divine G finally goes home and he's on that open road and he rolls the window down, there were men out in that audience who are just like softly moving their face up in the air, trying to feel that sensation, just yearning for that sensation again.
Mhm.
And then we as civilians got to walk out into that fresh air and know how precious it was. And yet all the men that we just shared that experience with had to stay.
You have been working almost 9 years in the film, and it clearly is an important film for you. How one does let go of that, or do you let go of this film, this story?
It's interesting, so Coleman, when he joined the project, he joined on the very first conversation we ever had without a script, without a budget, without anything. And what he told me was like, there are some projects that are seeking you to teach you something. You don't know what it is. You just know it's trying to. And I'm saying yes to that at this point in my
Hmm.
life. And so after we shot the film, we were wrapping and I was like, well, then what did it teach you? And he was like, I'll write it to you in a letter someday. And I was like, oh, maybe it wasn't a good lesson. Maybe he's mad at me. But then months later, we were together, and he was like, I am not ready to say what it's taught me, because if I say what it's taught me, that means it's over.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of us are just not ready to let go of this. So you'll have to ask me that sometime later.
It's funny how this business works because luck is an important part. You started working in this story a long time ago. Goldman was a working actor. He was respected, but he wasn't known. And sometimes, well, and suddenly, he popped. How has luck affected Sing Sing and your career as well?
Yeah, I mean, timing is everything, right? This movie could have only have happened when it happened,
Hmm.
because in those early years, there were times where it was like, we got to make it now, like now or never. And if we would have made it then, it would not be what it is now. But I think also sort of wrapped into, I think, the ethos of what this movie is this phrase that's used throughout the film, which is trust the process, which is kind of a mysterious thing. There's the work at hand and just every day, what can we do? How can we continue to sort of channel the spirit of what this project is and push it another step forward?
Hmm.
But there is a bit of submitting to the unknown, and I don't know, we would always ask that question of people of like, what does trust the process mean to you? And I would always get a different answer. And I think it's sort of same for your question around luck. Like, all I know is that this movie feels like it's fitting into a current that it needs to be right now.
How does one live with all the buzz around the film, with all the conversation, with all the predictions? Because you go online and you can see Variety
Yeah.
says this, the Hollywood Reporter says that.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't go on Reddit either.
I try not to.
Yeah, that's not good for you. Um, it's easy to get caught up in it because, you know, awards was not a dream we had when we were making it. We just wanted to make this film. Felt like we had to. And then you get into this sort of moment
Hmm.
and people place dreams on you that you didn't have before, that
And maybe
and
expectations. Yeah.
expectations. And I think you're constantly juggling how you will define success.
Hmm.
Will you define success now only through this gauntlet, of how we end up at the end of this tour?
Hmm.
But yet at the same time, I recognize and embrace that the awards sort of appeal to audiences gets people to watch a movie like this.
Hmm.
And if more people watch a movie like this, then I think more perceptions start to change around incarcerated people and people who are coming home. And, this sort of spins in this circle that I think, will improve the lives of a lot of people. And so
Yeah.
I think it's worth it.
Because a word phrase can be tricky, can be superficial, can be many things, but at the same time, we are in a moment where releases come and go in 2 weeks, and we stop talking about these stories, and this is a way to have to be 1 year talking about films that otherwise would disappear, and the next big thing would come.
Right.
It has a good side as well.
Yeah, and I think you know, the real measure of all of this is sort of what lasts, you know. You have the moment now, and there's a lot of sort of elements and sort of a blood sport, you know, and everyone's sort of fighting for this turf, um, and sort of claiming ground. But at the end of the day, it's like, what will we remember, you know? And I think the one thing that I do know is that every time we present this movie to an audience, and especially when I'm apologizing for the
Mhm.
people here today that only get to meet me, but when you get to meet these real life subjects and they come into a room, it is a transformative experience. And I just know that that goodness, you know, like that exchange, that emotion that's happening there multiplies and sort of will travel, you know, outside of these rooms.
Mhm.
That's really cool to see that happen.
And I think is that you are also going to meet a lot of people from the industry. You are going to have a lot of Q&As, a lot of like roundtables. Are you curious to meet anyone in particular?
No, I mean, yeah, it's like crazy. One thing that's been so um, lovely, and because you get these like you know, your partners in distribution, they'll post the press breaks that happen, and so you can sort of get an email and just look through anytime like Sing Sing's mentioned. And lately, because I'm gonna give him a shout out right now, Andrew Garfield has continued to talk about what this movie means to him when,
Mhm.
you know, in a number of different press outlets, and he is one of the more empathetic, sort of curious, wonderful like actors we have working today, and the fact that he's connecting to, you know, the beauty of these men and what this story is really cool. And so, Andrew,
Thank you, Andrew.
thank you, Andrew.
No, he's done a really amazing press tour with We Live in
Yeah.
Time, really emotional and refreshing, I think, when we are talking about press. So thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy San Sebastian. Sorry with the jet lag, but thank you very much.
I really
And good
appreciate it.
luck
Thanks
with
for having
the
me.
following months. Esto ha sido todo. Ya sabéis que podéis ver Sing Sing esto, bueno, hoy en Valladolid y el 10 de enero en los cines de España. Terminamos las entrevistas en Kinótico, la primera con K, la segunda con C. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.